What do we got? We've got Sif is close by. We haven't done the depths. No.
We haven't done the depths.
Or eventually you got to do Quelag, right? But
eventually
killing Lautrec first. I mean, we also don't have to.
Oh, there's just large Titanite sitting in Blighttown though.
Oh,
like in the swamp.
Yeah.
Like just sitting in the swamp.
Yeah.
So you don't have to farm the. You don't have to farm the slugs. There's like 2 or 3 just sitting in the.
Yeah.
So you can probably get to +7. So this will raise our Claymore by 2.
Right.
But if you go Dex, it'll raise it by 3. So it's a quality weapon. You need to raise them both.
I had never realized that. Could have been better than I've been using. 2 more hits. That's it.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable with this weapon actually.
Yeah.
Just because you get the... It's like half a dex weapon, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Well, I like
you can choose to do like medium damage over like the big hit.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's fun to play and be like you said, like be a bully, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
we're also not built to be a bully.
No.
We're not
we have
using
a magic crossbow.
we're not using like a heavy armor, heavy poise.
Yeah.
Vitality, endurance.
Yeah.
Strength. You know what I mean?
Oh well, yeah. That's the thing. That actually, like, that's the one like way of beating 4 kings that I've read. That's like.
Yeah, it's easy. Just tank
the worst. Yeah.
Because I remember I tanked 4 kings. Because eventually you want 40 endurance, right?
Yeah.
Which in this game is overpowered because it gives you all that equip load.
Yeah. So
you can eventually with Havels wear.
It's crazy.
Like not the heaviest armor, but pretty good heavy armor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what next?
Are we doing like?
Let's go Blighttown.
Sure.
Let's go pillage Blighttown.
Okay. What was the plan? Were we gonna? Maybe we should do him.
Oh,
one more good one. See,
have you seen Shin Godzilla?
No, I haven't.
It's really good.
Okay.
It's really good. It's like the way that he directs, because he was originally an animation guy, right?
Yeah.
Hideki Anno.
Yeah.
He did Evangelion.
Oh, okay.
Evangelion. He did Nadia. He was part of the Gainax guys.
Right.
So the way he does the way he directs like conversations are really interesting. It's like strange framings and stuff.
Oh, cool.
It's one of the best films to watch to learn how to direct like just conversations.
Okay.
Because like most of the movies is just politicians in boardrooms talking about what they should do next and stuff.
I like that. Like that's the Godzilla movie I want to see. Is the bureaucracy, like middle management aspect.
Because it's about
getting nations to work together to like.
It's about Japan's response to disasters.
Yeah.
Because historically they've been really bad at it.
Yeah. Cool.
Oh, I knew it. I wasn't paying attention. Okay. So I guess we can just talk, I guess. How have you been?
I've been good.
You finished your masters?
Sorta, yeah. I'm technically the marks were due today, so I'll know at some point. But
so you wrote a paper on this game.
I did.
Tell me about it.
Oh god, I'm not prepared for this. Yeah, I just wrote about
the Giant Club's over there. I don't really want it.
No.
Over there.
Yeah. I just wrote about difficulty and like what it means for a game to be difficult.
I'm actually interested to see what you say.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to it. I can send you a copy if you want to read it.
Like, we can just talk about it too. Because I don't feel like Dark Souls is that hard.
No, but it wasn't so much about like the reason I ended up I wanted like the idea changed so much from what it began as that it was going to be kind of like this overarching look at how things were difficult, right? Or like the different ways things could be difficult, whether that was, like because it was about reflexes or because it was it was challenging like some sort of puzzly thing that required you to or whether it was like a scary game and it was like emotional difficulty, right? So I had this idea to do this kind of like cross section with different games in it. And then of course my prof was like, no, that's impossible. Like, tone it down. Like pare
You
it
would
down.
have to do too
Pare it
much
down.
research.
Pare it down, pare it down, pare it down. And it was like, okay, well, what game has all this stuff? And I was like, oh, I just played Dark Souls. That was really cool. So of course I was like, oh, I guess I'll do it on that. And then it kind of became its own different thing based on that, where it was like, well, I can't talk about like 8 different kinds of difficulty, because of course you can come up with that, like that many or more, right? Where it's like I had a whole thing, and it was fine, but you know, it was only ever going to be like, basically I was writing an encyclopedia if I did that, and not a paper. So it just ended up being like, okay, like what am I really trying to say? And this long, like month-long process of figuring that out, where ultimately it ended up being like, you know, how does Dark Souls teach us about difficulty? And ultimately it ended up kind of being based around this idea that when we talk about difficult games or why games are difficult, that's about as far as it gets, and we don't really have the right words yet to talk about it in more depth than that. Or like the same way that we have a lot of words to talk about other aspects of video games, it's like we're missing.
Oh, no.
Oh,
always happens. Yeah.
We're just missing. I just feel like anything I've ever read about difficult games is like, oh, they're hard. You know, you better be up to the challenge or whatever. And like the words used are strange. Like there's this idea of like punishing or this idea of needing to exercise mastery or skill, and I feel like it can go deeper than that. And like talking about why games are so like it kind of became this thing where it's like, well, what words then, or what terms do we need to use to like denote difficulty, and what like when is a game difficult, when is it not? So I just started talking about my experience with Dark Souls then in the paper, and how for me the hardest thing was getting the fucking thing installed, right? And then everything after that was just like, I was just happy because I'd installed the game. And like this idea that, you know, difficulty doesn't necessarily begin when you press play, it happens way before that. And
I guess so.
Like that was it's an incidental point. I mean,
because there used to be like a time when you needed to be a wizard to play a computer game.
Yeah, and
or to even use a computer.
Well, and mostly I talked about DS Fix, right? And like this idea that there is this, because I'd been kind of spoiled by the internet on how to play this game, like there was this ideal version of the game that I was missing out on if I didn't do these things. And it was so hard to do those things because, you know, it was like months of, like, I just like figuring out how to install mods correctly and, you know, make the controller work on my PC and all this stuff. Oh, nice. It kind of became this just process of figuring out like, well, what dimensions of difficulty in Dark Souls are interesting, and like I ended up talking about constraints. This idea of constraints is cool. I found this really great book by a man whose name I forget. He designed Rainbow Six.
Okay.
And writes a lot about games and philosophy, but he has some really great early chapters about this idea of constraints in games. So like when you play a game, or a video game in particular, it's not a rule set, because rules are more socially enacted between parties, right? Like people. But when you play a game, you're constantly butting up against these constraints that define the way you play, but also kind of force you to think in new ways that create new avenues of play, right? It's just a different relationship. And I found that like that was kind of what defined the difficulty in Dark Souls more than like, and just games in general, right? Was this idea of constraints. Like that was the way I started thinking about my experience with the game. And that kind of, you know, I led from talking about that into a few other terms that come up or I thought were applicable to this game. Like, fuck, I don't remember now. Like I haven't thought about it in about a month, because that's when I handed my final draft, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
But, you know, that turned into talking about this idea of metagaming, and like how do you, when is difficult not enough, or like how is difficulty relative for people, and how do they change that or monitor and negotiate it? and that became talking about metagames, right? Where, you know, you have people who speedrun. Oh shit. You've got people who like speedrun games, but also do these challenge runs. And why do that in a game that is already, you know, pretty hard, but not hard? You know what I mean, right? Like, it has this reputation, and what is it about? Like, what do you get out of that experience? And part of it is just the process of, like, sliding difficulty to be fun and rewarding, but also partly just in and of itself a thing that you seek out in games that you don't really seek out in other things, right? Like, you don't read a book blindfolded or watch a movie blindfolded, or, you know, try and read a book as fast as you can because that's entertaining. You know what I mean? It's like this weird genre, like it's this weird medium specific thing.
Oh no. that hill.
Yeah, this part is rough. What are you going for? Something in particular here?
I think we're just looting this place.
But like, I don't know. The paper became just like the general. Like, if I had a thesis statement, it was mostly just difficulty is weird, and we need better ways of talking about it. Here are some words that we can maybe use to think about it in a more like fulfilling way than just this game is hard. It's only for, you know, hardcore gamers or whatever, because that's generally the trend that you see, right?
The marketing that started with Dark Souls.
Well, that's just it, and like now it's become its own subgenre of like things, and people try and name it things. Like I found Ian Bogos calls them mesocore games, and other people call them like abusive game design and things like that. And it's like, those are weird terms to use, right? Are they not? Like masochism is a part of playing video games, but it's also not always. Oh damn, these toxic guys. It just felt weird to me that like we had to jump to these things when there are, or like,
well,
it's limiting.
It's a psychoanalytic background still around.
Yeah.
Like masochism and stuff like that.
And just like this idea of like the game being abusive towards the player is like, there are games, like I'm not going to argue that there aren't games like that, but that's not what's really going on in Dark Souls, right?
No, I don't think so.
Like,
I think the often lauded term or phrase is hard but fair.
Yeah.
And then once you learn it, it's not that hard at all.
And that's what I push. And I feel like that feels like such an obvious thing to say, but I think it's still important, is that it like, and it's about learning too, right? Like that's the other thing that difficulty is all about, is it's about like familiarization and competency, and like there's skill involved in that. I mean, like certainly some games you will not be good at unless you have, you know, like the twitch reflexes or whatever, but Dark Souls isn't one of those games. And that's not necessarily why a game is ever hard, you know?
Like sometimes it is like that.
And certainly sometimes.
Like shooters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Twitch shooters and like fighting games.
And that's where my paper initially was like looking at all these different reasons why games were difficult, right? But then it kind of just became more about this idea of difficulty itself, and why it's kind of like this weird monolithic thing, when it really, when you actually start to think about it, there's so many facets to why games are difficult, right? Or like what difficulty is that ends up just being elided into this like. And that's the thing, right? Like these, like games like Dark Souls and these other things are always grouped into another section, but really they're no difficult than any other game that people play. It's just
puzzle games are harder.
That's what I mean, right? It's like,
I think,
like,
oh my god.
So it's just, yeah, that was the kind of idea behind it. I don't know how well it ended up working out, because like, I don't know. I am too close to it now to understand whether what I'm saying makes sense, or
I feel like
goes together. But, and it's so weird because so much of the paper ended up being this like intensely personal retelling of, you know, like my experience with this game. That
I feel like when you play a video game, you can't exclude that personal element.
No, there's
because
no
you can't.
Yeah.
Like there's no objective way to look at it.
Yeah.
But the way that you approached it, it's probably not how I would have done it.
And that's not like
I would have done more of like a close reading, where I just talk about the game, and like the difficulty would show up.
Yeah.
But it would be part of talking about the level design and how everything works together.
Oh, and I definitely like there are parts of it because like you can't just jump into talking about Dark Souls, right? So like there are early parts of the paper where I talk about the systems and how everything works together, right, to create this this thing. I highlight certain things like like the stamina is what makes it hard because you can't, or not necessarily what makes it hard, but like the stamina in conjunction with the combat system and all these other like the souls and the basic idea of just like this idea of the recurrence of death, right? It's not a bad thing, but just how you play the game. So like so much of the first like third of it is about
bitch. Ah! I knew there was a guy up here, but I thought he jumped down.
Yeah.
This guy always gives you 200 souls. And I think it's his item. I think it's the soul of the person on his stick.
Oh, that's funny.
No, because like he has a staff, right?
Yeah.
But it's a staff of someone's body.
Yeah.
It's made out of someone's body.
Yeah, their souls, yeah.
And every time he dies, he always drops the item, Soul of a Small Undead, or Lost Undead.
Really?
And it's 200 souls.
I didn't know that.
I always assumed it's the souls of like whoever he's using.
Yeah.
To make. He turned their body into a staff. Yeah, like it'd be interesting to show you Dark Souls 3. Because Dark Souls, I think this is does this break?
No. I don't know.
The other one. There's one like this that breaks. Because in this game, like the way I would talk about it is that it's designed around, okay, like in games, there's the line or the path.
Yeah.
Oh shit. They're pretty strong down here. And then you have rooms that are challenges, right?
Yeah.
In this game, like the line is the room.
Yeah.
Like the path is the challenge. But in like Bloodborne and in Dark Souls 3, they changed it. So you have a line and then it's like a hallway. Then you have rooms that you can go into to get stuff. So it would be interesting to show you Dark Souls 3 one time to show you just how different the design philosophy is in that game. And it's so interesting because it shows you like a different way of looking at game design that I think they changed in order to facilitate just development. Because this game was rushed at the end.
Yeah.
And I think it shows.
Oh, absolutely.
After Orson and Smoke, it's kind of a mess. But the other games, they don't really feel rushed, but the whole thing doesn't feel... You never get anything as intricate and kind of perfect as like the first half of this game.
Yeah.
Like everything leading up until
it just gets bigger.
Orson and Smoke is kind of intricate and perfectly planned, right? And then the rest of the games are kind of more like the DLC of this game, really.
Yeah.
The DLC of this game, where you have a path and then you have rooms on the side that you can go into to get certain items, but then if you die, you never have to go into those rooms again. So, and it's a straight line. The DLC is a straight line for the most part, and they try to keep some of the some of the intricacies in later levels in later games. Yeah, but it never gets as crazy as Dark Souls 1, where the whole game is built around it. Yeah, and it's kind of sad, but it's kind of like I understand why they did what they did, because they ran out of time here, and it's too much work to design a whole world that way. Oh my god, really? There's a sniper guy over there shooting that way. Yeah. But I want to kill the slug thing.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I also, like, there's a part where I talk about this idea, this other term, like, so there's constraints and there's also this idea of like the same author calls them cruxes, where there are these moments of like intense frustration until you figure something out, right? And that's what difficulty is. It's just a series of understanding and overcoming cruxes. And I like that idea in relation to Dark Souls, because that's what it feels like when you're fighting a boss, right? And you don't get it, or like you're going into an area and you die, and then you die in a slightly different way, and then you use that knowledge and then get a bit further, right? And I just feel like
Oh yeah.
you are hitting him. It's just
The life bar.
yeah.
I guess since I can't find the way there. And that's also interesting because, like, there could be a boss that you had a lot of trouble on, and someone else just has no trouble with it
Exactly.
because they understand it differently.
And that's the thing that I really wanted to try and emphasize is that like difficulty is such a relative term, right? That like things that are difficult to one person are easy to. And we talked about that so much about like which bosses were hard for us and which ones were easy, and like it's always surprising when you hear that someone had a hard time with something, but it shouldn't be because
Everyone is different.
everyone picks up on different. And the thing is like video games and Dark Souls in particular is throwing subtle cues at you all the time, and it's so easy to miss them, especially if you don't know what you're looking for, right? Like people play this game and don't realize that if you block with no stamina,
Get guard broken.
you get your guard broken, right? And like there's so many little consequences like that you need to pay attention to, but it becomes like an art to realize when something is happening and understand what it means, right? Especially since the game is about obfuscation as well, and like deliberately hiding those things to create its own sense of exploration, right? So the eagle shield.
It's actually a really good shield.
I thought that was really
It's a lightest great shield.
yeah.
It's a great shield.
It's not 100% though, isn't it?
But its
like
stability is like
I
its
see.
stability is really high.
I see. Whenever I see it, I'm like 90.
It's a very light great shield.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, there's, I don't know. It's just like it's such a tailor-made, like personal thing to play a game. It's down a lot. I think it's this way, and you go left, or yeah, there it is.
Light sources, but they don't feel like light sources leading you anywhere,
No.
which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
They feel like ambiance.
Yeah.
That's good if you're ballsy.
But yeah, I wrote that paper, and I don't know. It felt
I can see you getting a lot of
strange.
flack for it.
Well, the problem is that I wrote it. Oh yeah, right. I forgot about this guy. I love that. That's like one of the best parts of this.
He'll just leave you alone too.
Yeah, I know.
If you just leave him, he's just chilling.
Because it was this like 4-month long negotiation with my supervisor
Before you actually wrote it.
Before I wrote it,
Before you even were able to rate it.
and also I wrote the middle section first, and then I hopped to the end, and then the beginning, right? Oh yeah, I forgot about
I
that.
knew that. So, yeah.
I don't think I ever.
That must be really weird to not even be able to write it.
It was so unnatural to me, but I understand that's how like things get written. But I just like
Yeah.
everything up to that point, I've never written more than 10, 12 pages for anything, right?
Like, what, 3,000 words?
Yeah, and this ended up being about 12,000, so it wasn't even like, so like it was short compared to like what other people I think were writing or expected to write, or we were all
It's
expected
like,
to
what,
write.
30 pages, you said?
40 to 50 was what the assignment called for, and like my supervisor and I were just like, that's kind of dumb, let's write 25, right? Like, and then you can maybe, if you wanted, publish it in a thing, but
would be a
no one's
journal.
going to accept
50 words.
no one's
50
going to accept
pages.
50 pages, right? Which was the kind of it was an unnatural length for
And you're not like writing a book.
that's it. It's not going to become a chapter.
It's not going to become a chapter.
Not anytime soon or ever. So it was kind of like, let's just make it shorter, and even that was like so hard.
Actually, you know what'd be interesting? Who were your sources? Like, who did you find that you read that was interesting? Because there's so much game criticism, but most of it is bad.
That was the other problem I found, is that
So it'd be interesting to see.
it was hard finding sources that A, were relevant in the right way, B,
And
were
acceptable.
scholarly enough,
And
and
acceptable,
C,
yeah.
were acceptable to my supervisor, right? Because he has his own standards, which are strict and good, and that was a good thing. But I also felt like sometimes it meant that he was biased against things that I necessarily wasn't, right? Biased against, or above using as a source, right? So like there are certain, like, I don't know, there.
Like, I'm guessing like you couldn't use like print people, right?
I actually ended up using
okay.
primarily books, which was
Oh shit!
uh
I had to go around
yeah.
because I fell.
Yeah.
Okay.
I ended up using primarily books, which was a blessing and a curse because
When I said print, I meant like games journals and stuff.
didn't really. And
most of it is not that.
I could like some of it I may have pointed out to, and I did a little bit as like using like this is how people talk about it. But again, it's like that question of who's your audience? Are they scholarly or are they critical, right? Like, and it was one of those things that it was like I still don't really know. You know what I mean? Like it was this process of like who am I writing for? And what is this thing supposed to be? And I don't know if I really answered those questions for myself, which is a bit frustrating.
I feel like that's a problem I have as well. Shit.
Oh, fuck.
I feel like that's a problem I have as well.
At least you're on the right side of the bridge.
No, but then that's a lot of levels. I didn't expect to.
Yeah, but you didn't get the bonfire. Fuck.
Because I fell.
Yeah.
Those souls might be gone, to be honest.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Did we go this way? It's not the right way.
No, it's not. I was wondering what you're doing.
So you mentioned one guy you ended up using.
Oh god.
The Rainbow Six guy.
The Rainbow Six, man. He wrote a very excellent book. There's a book that just came out called Metagaming that my prof recommended that was excellent as well. And I ended up using, those are kind of the two, because like my idea was like new words for difficulty. Like, let's think about this. Here are three, right? It was Constraints, Cruxes, and Metagames. And those are the two books that those came from. But I looked at other things too. Like I had some more general like video game theory stuff, and there are things by people like Mackenzie Wark, and I really liked. Oh man, what is the name of that person? I used some stuff by Jesper Jewell,
God.
but that was a bit outdated, and. Yeah, like it was tough. That's the one thing I had problems with was finding articles, like scholarly articles was really difficult, and I ended up not really using any, and mostly depended on these books that were about general video game ideas, right? And so I only ended up having 6 or 7 sources for the whole thing, but I'd read them all like at least once, and had. Was really thinking about the ideas in them and responding to them. So it was weird. It felt weird that way too, because I was like, I can't hand this in with only 6 sources, but I am.
It's like that's what you have. That's what you have.
Yeah. And it's like there are things there. I found some articles specifically about Dark Souls, but they are not what I would need or use, right?
Yeah, I've done some. I remember when I was playing this game, I looked up what was written about it.
Yeah.
There's not much written about it.
No, but because it's like this insider thing that only certain types of people ever look at, and I think that's fascinating, right? And whenever I discover a thing like that, I'm always, like, at least for like a few months, I'm always like just fascinated. Like that's why I got back into Diablo 2 and looked at like the speed running, the crazy people who speed run Diablo 2, and the people who like have level 99 characters and all this stuff, and like play these different types of games, right? Like that, and then Dark Souls was another one for me where I was just super into that for a while, and like learning about this community of people. But as far as barriers to entry, like this is a pretty tough one to get around.
Was it that bad for you?
Not for me, but I think in general, right? Because like I used 6 or 7 sources, but I read a lot more, and even recent, like published in the last couple of years, they rarely, if at all, mention something like Dark Souls. I read a whole book about.
Well, it's pretty recent, I guess.
Yeah, 2011 or like 2009 from.
It usually takes like
Souls.
4 or 5 years before those papers and books get published.
Yeah, there are things, but the problem is, like I read a whole book about, like Japan's influence on the gaming industry. That. In its later chapters talks about Final Fantasy, but that not Dark Souls at all, right?
Because Final Fantasy is kind of a staple now.
Yeah, and it was surprising to me that like.
No, because Dark Souls is part of the resurgence of Japanese game development again.
Yeah.
Because it's been seen to be in decline for a long time. basically since like the PS2 era.
Mm-hmm.
So Dark Souls is like one of like it's like the main success story in Japan. So that's why it's kind of big now, but like it's just now, you know.
Yeah.
Like Dark Souls, then the whole Souls franchise, right? So it's a pretty recent thing.
And I mean, the other problem is that the bias with scholars is that they're not going to dump 100 hours into this, right? Because they only have 10. So it makes sense. And that's the problem. I think that's part of the problem with a lot of the literature. Like there are things that focus on experimental and indie games because those are the types of things that you can digest in a weekend and then write a thing about and have it published, right? And that's cool, but I feel like, and that's the problem. It's like scholars are all like on this one end of the spectrum where they're thinking about, you know, games as art and like how do we think about that by avoiding the industry side of things, right? And talking about games by individual creators and things. And then there are the critics who it's their job to like review this stuff and talk about it and think about it. So, and almost to like the detriment of the other side, right? And it feels like as someone who...
Okay, so wait. I wasn't really paying attention. So like,
oh yeah.
Okay, which side is going where?
Like I feel like scholars are looking at a lot more...
Like auteur stuff?
Auteur, experimental things.
Okay.
And critics and that side of like that type of writing about video games is a lot more focused on the mainstream stuff. And as someone who reads or like would read both or be interested in both, it feels strange to be like being pulled in those different directions. They're talking about stuff
like Flower,
yeah,
and Braid,
yeah.
and and The Witness,
yeah,
and they kind of they would ignore Dark Souls as well, for the most part, right?
Yeah, and partly because of its reputation, and I think like that's what I wanted to write a bit about, right? As well as this idea of like, I didn't end up getting as much of it in as I wanted to, but the whole like community behind Dark Souls doesn't really like, it helps itself and it also is a huge detriment because it like the whole get good stuff is interesting to me as this idea of like that feels like intensely tied to this idea of difficulty, right? Because and yet at the same time you have this huge community of people and willing to help each other, and also it's baked into the game itself with this the whole multiplayer aspect, right? Yeah. Like it is both trollish and incredibly helpful, right? And it's supposed to be both at once, and that's fascinating to me because so much of games is now controlling the communities that play the games, right? That like, I don't know. I find it really neat that a game is okay and somehow manages to balance both ends of that, along with the player's own agency as they play, right?
Oh shit.
Yeah. Fire dogs. I do miss the Zweihander's one hit. Like,
it's flattening, right?
Yeah. It's a big stick.
Oh shoot. The reach is pretty good on this thing though.
Oh yeah. I think it's definitely worth the swallow.
So our souls are over there. They're behind that drop. We can get them from...
You could go down the right way. And...
come around from the other side?
Yeah. Or maybe.
Fire. Because it's on the other side, right? Of the bridge.
Like, I mean, we're just doing this to, like, do this. So there's no, like, end goal in mind to this direction. So I feel like if you don't have the bonfire and you die, like, if you get the souls and get out of here, that's great. But if you don't, then it's not the end of the world, but I don't know.
I might as well sit.
You did it. This was another thing I talked about, was like this idea of like, do you get this bonfire or do you not? How it's a fun mechanic.
Because the whole other side is still unpopulated.
Yeah.
And I want to get those souls.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then we can level up. And then if you have no souls, we can just run out. Because this area is actually not that bad if you don't care about keeping souls.
Yeah. Are they down there or are they on this side? I think they're on this side of the bridge.
They're over here.
Because you died just underneath, just below you.
They're down here. Oh, almost enough. If I had enough for 3, that would be great. See?
Yeah.
Nameless soldier. So it's
such a little detail.
come on.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I handed that paper in about a month ago. I've just been waiting.
Oh. That was stupid of me. I was listening to you and thinking about what to say next. And I just stood there and took it. Because I thought I had another swing. See, there they are right here.
Yeah.
And then
Get 'em.
1700. This is the blooming.
I thought that was souls.
I think this is the blooming.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's 3 of them. So they give you
Just before
you
need it.
enough to get through, I guess, the first part.
Yeah, I
There's
think
only like 3 snipers, right?
I think maybe they assume you die and you're like, what was that? And then you have a couple shots at it, right?
So should we level up?
Yeah, do it.
Just level up and then
Do it.
run out of here.